So let's kick it off with Joe Biden, the president, coming to New York City today, conveniently one day after the funeral of that second fallen officer. 2 cops killed a week ago in Harlem while trying to effect an arrest of a bad guy who's also dead now thanks to the bullet of a third rookie cop who was with them. 22-year-old and 27-year-old cops. The streets of New York filled with police in a way I've never seen before. It was really stunning. It was chilling, and it was very emotional. And so Joe Biden comes to town. He could have made it to the funeral of Officer William Mora. He didn't. He decided to wait and come today. And he says he's coming now because he wants to highlight New York, and I'm quoting now, as a great example of a city successfully deploying a strategy to fight violent crime. What? You tell me, what is he saying? How could he say that on the heels of what just happened here? And of course, 2021 was the deadliest year for law enforcement ever. And New York is facing record crime rates right now.
Yeah, Megyn, it's, Joe Biden, the president, sounds like Johnny come lately on this. We saw in 2021, the Democratic Party spent most of the year talking about defund the police. And the consequences of the defund the police sort of idea or vision or mindset is what you're seeing play out all across this country, a rampant increase in violent crime. And it's so disappointing to have leadership in the Democratic Party that talks about defunding the police. Again, they are now Johnny come lately to the party of wanting to highlight violent crime. But your viewers, your listeners, folks all across America recognize and have recognized that this is an issue. And so the president is slow to address it. I know there's been Republican leadership and men and women of law enforcement that have been craving the attention and the help. A lot of folks, again, have talked about defunding the police. It's my view, and I think the view of a lot of common sense Americans and folks, again, that are listening and watching it, that we need to take every opportunity to encourage, to speak encouragement into our law enforcement community, but also put money where our mouth is and help support them however we can. And again, I think it's disappointing that the president and a lot of his party have been Johnny come latelys on this.
You know that their main focus is guns. That's the only thing that they are focused on. Guns, gun violence. They're not actually focused on fighting crime. They're focused on just getting guns off the street, which, I mean, okay, but there are over 400 million guns in America, and they're not going to get the guns off the street, even if they could do it, right? And so now you've got a situation where they're saying, okay, we'll do gun reform, and even Al Sharpton is out there saying, all right, we'll work on crime just as long as it's about guns. That's all I want to hear. I don't want any tougher on crime policies is basically what he's saying. And Joe Biden indeed is proposing none. So you tell me whether anything changes in New York, in Chicago, in Philly, in San Fran, in LA, and I don't know how things are in Kentucky. I hope better, unless we get rid of these soft on crime DAs, for one example.
Yeah, well, I'll say here in Kentucky, our largest city, Louisville, saw a record number of homicides last year in 2021, but that was preceded by a record high number in 2020. Last year, we had over 180 homicides in Louisville. And so we are seeing a lot of bad guys, violent criminals emboldened by this view that it can be open season on our law enforcement community and open season on a lot of members in our community that are just trying to go about their every day and provide for their families and come home and be safe. So it, again, the only way that something is going to change, albeit or with related to this administration, is if we change the administration that is in the White House right now, because I think they feel hamstrung and are not willing to say what the problem is, which is there are bad people out here. We've got to make sure that our law enforcement community feels emboldened to go after those folks and fight crime the way it needs to be fought.
And it's also true that while I think there's a strong contingent of center lefties who don't want these soft on crime policies, they're not in favor of this. There is a definite contingent on the left, the sort of established capital left, that doesn't like cops, that doesn't feel particularly sympathetic when the cops get shot. And they're not, when crime rises, they see it as some sort of a social statement about how bad America is, and not as something to be targeted with more cops or laws or prison time. Susan Sarandon might be an example of that. You and I look at the swaths of police officers covering the sidewalks in Manhattan yesterday and then earlier last week on the first funeral of the first fallen officer, and think, oh my gosh, I mean, any normal human is moved by that. She tweeted something out saying, this is what fascism looks like. Fascism. And then she added in her own caption, so if all these cops weren't needed for crime that day, doesn't that mean they aren't needed any day? How does the president deal with that contingent of the left? And how do the rest of us deal with them? Because so far, a lot of cities have been kowtowing to them.
Well, I think that's what I was alluding to earlier, is that in large part, I don't know if the president will. I think he's in many ways hamstrung by that faction of the left of his party that is adamantly opposed to law and order, to the law enforcement community, and makes just disparaging comments like that. Again, Megyn, to your point, you see those images out of New York and just know how powerful those images are. And how somber that day was. I know here in Kentucky recently, we had an officer that was ambushed and killed. These are trying and unbelievably difficult times for our law enforcement community all across the country. And I think as leaders, particularly on my side of the aisle, we have to be able to speak empowerment into our law enforcement community. We have to encourage them. And again, to your point, there are a lot of folks that perhaps are not center right or not, but are center left, that know and see what is happening in this country and recognize the importance of having a law enforcement community that feels empowered to do their jobs, to make sure that all of us can exist and live safely in our homes.